Hey, what up, everybody? Happy Monday. Here we are, episode number 464 of Let There Be Talk on the Monday, March 11th. Glad you're here. Glad you're on board. Glad you support and dig what I do. Let's give a quick shout out to my main man, Mr. Mark Maron, celebrating his 1,000th episode of What the Fuck today. 1,000 episodes, and I know how much fucking work that takes. It just seems like it's endless work. So congrats to one of the greatest podcasters of all time. He had me on years ago. I've been on a few times, but years ago when I was 3 years into comedy, and it completely changed my life in more ways than one. It changed it for my comedy career, but it also changed it in a way where I have one hell of a friend. So I love you, Mark Maron, and congrats on that well-deserved success. The guy busts his ass his whole life doing art, and now just out there killing it. Everything he's doing, the podcast, the TV show Glow, his last comedy special was by far one of the greatest. I love you, buddy. Anyway, let's get into it today. You want to get into something cool. I've got a man on today who does something that I can relate to. He works in a field that he loves, a passion. Watches is this man's business. Cameron Barr of Craft and Tailored. I can relate to this guy because he left a job that he didn't really dig and went for it, and now he is living the dream. He goes to his own shop every day and sells watches, and he's around watches. He buys watches. He talks watches. And he's a happy man. So it is definitely a handmade episode. And we don't just talk watches either. You know, whenever I have somebody on that's into watches, they're usually into great stuff. Cars, architecture, denim, boots, jackets. That's how we met. We met over a jacket he was wearing. Hilarious. What a lunatic I am, and we are. Anyway, the man knows his watches. His knowledge is fucking next level, and this episode will answer millions of questions I always get emailed to me, and I feel this guy is definitely going to answer anything you've ever wondered about buying a vintage Rolex or Patek or Tudor or AP, anything. This guy knows it. He can spit out the numbers. He knows the movements. He knows the case sizes. He knows the years, everything. I used to know all that shit, but my memory's just frying up. But you're going to love it. You're going to love it. And even if you don't like watches, this is a great conversation. It might inspire you to go out and do what you love. Maybe you love painting. Maybe you've always wanted to be a mechanic or some kind of craftsman. Get out there and do it. That's all I can say. Get out there and do it. We're only here once. Big love to Houston this weekend. If you're a new listener from the Houston shows, I cannot tell you how fucking great Houston was. I was not ready to take on all that love. Thank you, Houston, and thank you, Joey Diaz, for having me out there. I cannot tell you how much Joey has been how great of a friend he's been and how much help he's been. I just love that man. That guy crushes it, gets standing O's all the time. People are always like, yeah, I got a standing O. I'm like, I haven't really seen standing O's much, but when you're out with Joey, that shit happens. He's just in it. He's giving it to you 1,000%. Funny as fuck and a great human. So thank you, Houston. Thank you, Joey Diaz. And looking forward to going back to Houston one day and headlining that incredible Houston Improv. What a magic room. Upcoming shows, Comedy Castle in Detroit, April 11th through the 14th. I'll be headlining. Las Vegas Comedy Cellar at the Rio Hotel, April 29th through May 5th. Paps Theater with Joey Diaz on 4/20, dude. And also the 19th, we're in St. Paul. These shows are all on my website, deandelray.com. June 21st, 22nd, 23rd, I'll be at the La Jolla Comedy Store. And those are the upcoming road dates. Oh, San Jose. Got a San Jose date coming up too, which is on, what is that, March 30th. And I don't have the info in front of me because I'm professional. But it'll be in my Twitter and on my website and Instagram. Brand new Patreon donators. Here we go. Look at these fucking soldiers, as Joey would say. Soldiers. Daryl Norman. Ed Berman, my good buddy Ed Berman. Michael Macy. Robert Searles. And Aaron Griffith. Fucking brand new Patreoners. I've been putting out bonus episodes every Thursday or Friday, and I hope you guys are digging them. It's just me rocking the mic. It's just me rocking the mic, yo. I'm sitting here, man. I'm like, man, my denim smells. I'm sitting on my couch like, these pants smell. Smell the glove. Okay, let's get into it right now. Cameron Barr is the guest today. Enjoy this. Retweet it, subscribe, go to the YouTube channel, do whatever you need to do to help spread the word of Let There Be Talk. That's the only way we are going to make this thing kick ass. I love all you guys. Keep the candles lit. Long live Brody Stevens. Enjoy it. All right, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Let There Be Talk. This will be a kind of combo handmade watch episode. It's a handmade episode and a watch episode. It's also going to be all about all kinds of stuff that I enjoy. And this man, introduce yourself.
Hey, this is Cameron from Craft and Tailored. I'm the president and CEO of Craft and Tailored here in Los Angeles.
It's so funny how we met because I would call it the perfect Let There Be Talk storm.
Yeah.
So I'm in the Filson flagship store in Union Square, New York, and I'm in there just talking to a guy, and I see you wearing a Shot leather.
Yeah.
Who I've had Jason on, the owner of Shot. And I go, oh, nice jacket. And then this other guy rolls up. He's like, hey, Dean, big fan of your podcast. He's wearing a Ship John leather Wills jacket.
Yeah.
And in that 1 minute, it was just like...
It was a trifecta.
Everything that I talk about on this show, it was almost like... If I would have been filming myself, it would have looked like we set it up. Like, oh, this guy just happened to walk in and he sells vintage watches. And this guy had a leather Wills. But that's how it went down. And It was unbelievable.
True story.
Yeah. So I start talking to you and I tell you I'm a comedian. What do you do? And you go, oh, I sell vintage watches. Never heard of you. I'm a watch freak. I go all over every watch store there is. Never been here. And that's what I love about life, and especially in LA or New York, you find new spots that are like, oh, this is the spot. So
well, it's funny too, because I think when you're into this kind of shit, like there's kind of like this vibration out there, and we all kind of like we're onto the same shit, right? Yeah. It's like I compare it to ice cream all the time. You like ice cream, I like ice cream. You like pistachio, I like chocolate. At the end of the day, it's all ice cream, and we're all kind of sharing the same stuff, but. Yeah, it's funny because I meet a lot of people like that a lot where we have a common interest or it might be an auxiliary interest. And then, it's like with Ship John, I'm like, sign me up. I want one of those jackets. I'm following them on Instagram and I didn't even know that they existed until we met, Right. So it's a funny world that I think we live in, especially when you're into this kind of stuff because it's so specific. And I mean, it's kind of nerdy.
Oh, it's super nerdy.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
But-
I just talked about it a couple days ago. I used to shit on Comic-Con all the time.
Right.
And then there I was at Inspirations, and I realized that's just a Comic-Con.
For dudes that like
It's
salvage
just
denim and
different
boots.
costumes.
Yeah.
We got our costumes on. Ooh, this is 21 ounce, and
Right.
this is vintage horsehide, and this is a 60s Rolex.
Right.
That's the same as being a Spider-Man from a certain era.
Yeah.
You know?
With the special ray gun of the blah, 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 or
Right.
the bag that so-and-so used in. Yeah,
Exactly. So it's really interesting. I loved, as soon as I looked at your Instagram, I realized, oh, we are the same human. You love Porsche 911s. You
Yeah.
have one, a 964. Or
It's
what-
actually 75.
Oh, 75.
2.7
Oh.
911S. Yeah.
There you go.
G-body.
Yeah, how long
Not
you
to
had
get
that?
specific or anything.
Yeah.
I think I've had it's probably coming up on a year. And the funny thing about that is we have a common connection over the 911
TLG.
too. Yep. Our friend Marco over at TLG. So Marco was and is a watch dude. And oddly enough, I had reached out to Ted Gashoot from Petrolicious, and he does like a lot of automotive blogging. And I was like, hey, I'm ready for my 911. Like, who should I call up? And he's like, just call Marco. He's got you dialed in, right? And so Marco has become a really, really close and dear friend. And it's kind of funny because Marco is helping me understand the world of Porsche and really has been kind of a guidance point for me within Porsche. And I think I'm kind of the same thing for him, where he'll send me something. I'm like, no, dude, you don't want that, or that's fucked up, or the bezel's not right, or the da-da-da, or you should look at these kinds of things. And he's kind of doing the same thing with Porsche. So it's fun because, Marco's obviously a Porsche expert, and I guess I'm kind of the inverse of him in the watch world. And we're sharing and kind of getting into these passions the same, but they're different things, So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So you've been open for 3 years,
Mm-hmm.
but how old are you?
How old am I? 33.
33.
Yeah.
At what age do you start collecting watches, and do you get into? Remember a couple of years ago, there's that kid. He was like 16 or whatever.
Yeah.
Remember that guy?
Yeah.
He's just floating around. All of a sudden, there's like a 16-year-old selling Newmans and stuff.
Yeah, he's actually a close friend of ours. It's Michael Morgan. He's down in Newport Beach. I think he actually goes to school in UC, and Mike's a great guy. But I don't know. I think, it's definitely a different type of person that really gets into this, because what's interesting is if you were walking down the street wearing, we have I think it's a 68 or 69 6239 black dial Paul Newman Daytona in front of us. And if you were to walk down the street wearing that watch, I mean, probably 10 out of 10 people wouldn't know that is a $250,000 to $300,000 watch.
Not at all.
So it's a weird thing, because you really have to be in the know. And the guy that's going to recognize that watch, he's going to be the inverse of you in some form or another, who's going to go, oh, that's a Newman. Just like it would be with like a jacket. It's like, oh, is that 21 ounce, wax twill, tin cloth, blah, blah, blah. Right. So that's kind of the funny thing about it. But at what age do you get into it? I don't know. I think, we have some young collectors. We have old collectors. I got into it when I was in my mid-20s. I was in the technology business. And the reason why I got into it was technology was booming at the time. I'd done really well for myself when I was young. But what was interesting is the crowd of people that I was around, they were into luxurious, exclusive shit, but they were all buying everything off the rack. It was like, oh, I went and bought a McLaren. Oh, I went out and bought this brand new
Louis Vuitton bags. We know it all.
Yeah.
They're buying, a Bentley or whatever, the new stuff. Just
Totally.
Not stuff that is incredible, but it doesn't really have soul.
Yeah, there's no vibe. There's no special factor to
There's
it.
no
right?
story with it.
There's no story.
You need the story instead of just going like, well, I made money in the tech biz and then I just bought what you're supposed to buy, these high dollar
I
things.
bought a yellow gold Yachtmaster.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, so I never really appreciated that. And I always kind of felt like I was the black sheep in the crowd, right? I was kind of the rebellious dude. I always saw past stuff. I didn't really want to conform to like the normal details of shit. And so
Were you in LA or San Francisco for the tech stuff?
LA, but we traveled around a lot. I was in like the DC Beltway a lot,
Right.
out in Texas, all over the place. I traveled, probably less than I do now. I travel like an insane amount, but I traveled a lot. So we were all over the place. But so what got me into it was I wanted something that had, kind of that little extra detail. And it wasn't for anybody else but myself. I wanted to know. For example, my suits. Like, I would have my suits custom tailored off of a bolt of fabric that was dead stock in Seville Row, and the buttonholes were functioning on my coat, or my trousers didn't have like belt loops because they were made to fit my ass. So it was like that kind of stuff that nobody really understood or could get into, but it was an extra detail and kind of a luxurious element that wasn't for anybody else but myself.
Who was getting you into that, though? Because when you look at me, it's really James Bond was my guy.
Yeah.
As far as luxurious items. At a young age, 6th grade, I'm like, oh, wow, he's got these Rossignol skis.
Right.
He's got this Lotus Esprit. What's that? Of course, Ferraris and Lamborghinis, everybody knows that. But this guy really had keen things. The Bond, so to say, Rolex, all that stuff. And then that really got me into luxurious items.
Yeah, well, and I think, if we peel back the layers of the onion a little bit, like I actually do like Louis Vuitton a lot. I don't know if I like the new stuff as much, but
the Virgil line, I'm out.
Yeah,
I'm out. But the stuff with Kim Jones, unbelievable, and what he did with the brand, cross-pollinating Supreme and that. And
sick.
And then getting the hell out of that immediately, knowing. I think now they've gone too far the other way.
A little bit of a mic drop, right? It's like, hey, I'm going to do this. It's going to be rad.
That's what he did.
But then we're not going to water it down, which I think that's the reason why that stuff is still relevant and still really special. I think for me, if you look around the office, it's James Bond, it's Neil Armstrong, it's Paul Newman. I mean, we have photos of these guys, and these were guys that I just thought were badasses.
Same here.
Steve McQueen, yeah. I mean,
the Explorer 2 that he wore, the orange hand,
the 5512,
the Triumph motorcycles, all that stuff.
It's sick, yeah. And if we go back and we're like kind of talking about like the luxury brands, like if you look at Louis Vuitton, not many people know this. I mean, you might, but not many people know that I think he was a bellhop in Paris, and what he did was he handled people's luggage all day, and he was like, you know what, this is shit luggage. Like, this is really bad. He became an expert on luggage and then created his own luggage. And it wasn't about luxury. It wasn't about brand. It wasn't about the LV logo. It was about making something that was really, really high quality. And I think back in that time frame, people that were affluent could really afford the high quality stuff. And that translated into being a well-made product, but also something that was kind of associated with the affluent and whatever. And kind of the same thing with like Rolex or Omega, et cetera. The dive watch, it was a tool, right? The Daytona, it's a stopwatch, right? So these are functional items that now have kind of a luxury element tied to them. But I think at the heritage at the core root of all of it, the heritage really revolves around them being high quality products that were made for people who demanded something of quality and of substance, not necessarily a brand, right?
What's the first watch you buy?
What's the first watch I got, or the first watch anybody goes
First
after?
watch you bought.
So the story is really interesting. I had a jeweler friend, and I knew I wanted a vintage Rolex. I wanted something that was kind of, again, like sheep and wolf's clothing, or wolf and sheep's clothing, rather. I wanted something that was special and cool, but something that like totally flew under the radar. And so I called him and I said, next time a vintage Rolex walks in the door, let me know. I want to get something that's cool and vintage.
What shop were you at?
It was like a little jeweler. I don't even know if they're there anymore. It was like a little spot in Long Beach, and it was kind of like a mom and pop shop. A few months went by, and then he calls me and he goes, "Hey, this guy is bringing in a Rolex. I don't know if it's going to be something that you're into, but it's an old school Submariner." And so I get there and I look at it, and the guy wants like $750 for it. And it's a meters first, so it's a 1967 meters first Rolex reference 5513.
Incredible.
And it was missing the bezel, and it was missing the crown, and it was kind of like a project watch. The bracelet that was on the watch wasn't original, but there was a story and there was some soul there. And the guy had the watch since new. He was a diver here in Southern California.
It was missing the crown?
It was missing the crown.
What did he say? What happened to the crown?
He doesn't remember. He had it in a drawer for like 20 years. and so it was just like sitting there, and he finally like brought this thing in, and I think he wanted like $800, and I talked him down to like $750, right? And so
that's a lot of money though for a watch missing. At the time, they weren't going what they are going now.
Yeah, complete. That watch was probably worth at the time maybe $5,000 or $6,000. I mean, it was a good deal, no doubt, right? And this is before I got into the business of doing this and whatever. But what's interesting, and this is really what lit my passion for this, is I had to find the correct bezel, the correct insert, the correct crown. I had to get it serviced. I didn't even know if the watch was like reloomed or real or what the deal was. So, I really had to dive into this thing and kind of learn about it.
You had nothing to lose though at that amount of money.
Not really.
Nothing.
No. So, I mean, $750 is still $750.
Yeah.
But it's not like if it turned out to be a fake, I was going to like lose sleep over it, right? So I ended up sourcing the correct bezel and the correct insert and the correct crown. And then I met a wonderful gal who isn't she was a CW21. She was down in Newport Beach. And she worked for this great little shop called Jewelers on Time, and they're still there. Two twin brothers own the shop, and they have one of the best servicing centers in, I think, Orange County. But in any case, she was on like the Rolex forums, and she was like kind of pointing me in the right direction on parts and what I should be buying for the watch that I had found. And I found out that she was kind of local, and so she ended up servicing my watch, and we became really good friends. And I think through that process, that's really, again, what kind of like lit my passion for these vintage watches and the history and the technical elements behind them. But that was my first watch. It was a 1967 Rolex Submariner 5503.
What year is that?
It was in 1967.
No, what year was when you bought the watch?
Gosh, that at this point was maybe like 13 years ago. So what is it, 2019 now? So yeah, it was a while ago. Yeah.
So you buy the watch and you're in the techie world.
Mm-hmm.
And how long does it take you to start really thinking, I might want to do this for a business? Because you've left the techie world and now you have, I would say in front of me, what do you think?
Not including what's in the two rolls here. I mean, we're
about a $1.5 there?
Yeah, probably about $1.5.
Yeah, about
and this is just what is in our vault today. I mean, our insurance, like, they freak out when we break certain numbers, so we actually have to keep stuff at a bank vault.
Of course.
But yeah.
So how does it happen?
So what's interesting is when I was on the road doing these meetings, it is very boring, but I would basically have a breakfast meeting, a lunch meeting, or a dinner meeting, or some variation thereof. And I'd be out in like bumfuck Texas, meeting with some CIO of a company who was like out there or whatever. And I would have all this time. So what I would do is I would just kind of go to the pawn shops and go to the flea markets and whatever between my meetings and search for this stuff. And then what ended up happening is I amassed this big collection of these things that I've found over my travels. And I started to kind of feel guilty. I started to kind of feel like a hoarder because at one time I had, now I could probably say I have what maybe 10 to 15 5513s in my collection at any time. I don't really view them as mine because they're always for sale, but we own them, right? And so I kind of started to feel like a hoarder because I had amassed this big collection of these watches, and at any given time I can only wear really 5 different watches in a week, right? So you're like, why do I need 6 5513s? I really don't.
Yeah.
And then you kind of start to make these friends, and you share your passion and starting to help people acquire and buy this stuff. And what happened with the tech business is the guys I was working for, they really didn't. There was no substance, there was no soul, there was no passion. The money was great, but I had this kind of, I call it my mic drop moment, but I had this moment of realization where I was like, it doesn't matter about the money. It doesn't matter how many deals I close. It doesn't matter how well the stock is doing. It matters. My happiness is really important.
Absolutely.
My fulfillment, So I kind of had like this mic drop moment where I was like, fuck all of this. I'm leaving. I'm going to, chase this passion of mine and source and find these watches. And people thought I was crazy, right? Like my parents thought I was crazy.
Whenever you leave a paycheck, people think you're a lunatic, which is hilarious. Like me starting comedy at 44 years old.
Right.
People are like, what?
Mm-hmm.
Here's what I want to ask you before we go on any further on that. You're out buying these watches in pawn shops and everything, but how do you start to get the knowledge to know if they're fake or real? Are you studying, or do you have like a mentor that's going, nah, stay away, like you're doing to Marco at TLG?
Yeah, sure.
Are you taking pictures and saying, is this good? Or are you just buying blind and rolling with it?
Kind of, I guess in that time, it was a little bit of both. I mean, I'll be very honest with you and transparent. Like, I made some bad buys. Like, I had bought watches that I thought were legit and that they ended up being like Franken watches or whatever.
Yeah, when you open them up, different
maybe
movements.
a bridge was changed or
Yeah.
the dial wasn't right. And so I learned a lot through that. A lot of it back then was reading, like books. Like, we have just a couple of them here in the office. But
That was the best, the Submariner one.
Yeah, I love that book. I'm actually really good friends with the Mondani family, and they produce, a lot of these books, which are great.
These books are phenomenal. They've got one on the Nautilus.
Oh, it's insane.
It just knocks me out.
Yeah, the cover of the book is like in like cork.
Yeah, and
it's like in
I
cork,
think they're
like the box.
These books are like $650.
They are
right?
not cheap. Yeah,
but they're loaded with info.
Yeah,
and the info with Rolex is unbelievable. Just if you wanted to dive into a Kermit. How many different dials there are? There's a 5-click dial. There's a 3-click dial. There's a different bezel.
Like, how many variants are there? Like 7 or 8? So there's 8 mark variants on a
unbelievable.
Kermit.
That's just one watch.
Yeah.
And then all the different bezel colors and everything.
Yeah.
I used to really have all this in my head. Same with vintage Fender and Gibsons. And after a while, your brain just goes, no more of that. If you're not constantly in it, you just let it go.
Yeah.
Because your brain, as you get older, can only keep so much info. But then as I look over it, it comes back real quick. Like if you knew Spanish or French. Or
it's like riding a bike.
Yeah, you just kind of go, oh, yeah, the 5711 or you just, 1016s. You just start, it all comes back. But so you're out there and you're getting burned a few times and stuff.
Yeah, a couple. I was very fortunate. Like I started off with, I would say, like a high-end mid-range watch. It wasn't until the later part of my collecting and kind of more of the start of my career that I started moving into like heavier pieces like Paul Newman's and, early rare prototype kind of stuff. But yeah, a lot of it was like the internet. It was reading books. And this is in the age before like the Houdinkis of the world and the Fratello watches and et cetera, et cetera. Like there was still a lot of unknown information, which was also kind of cool too, because you could go out and you could find stuff that was like a barn find and get a good deal on it. Now it's like Granny opens up the drawer. There's a Paul Newman in there. And it's not only a Paul Newman from Granny, but it's a Paul Newman with a tropical dial and a rare prototype bracelet. And you're like, Granny, how did you know this? And it's the internet, right?
So yeah. Also, it works the other way, though, too. They have just a dumb Rolex, and they go, well, I Googled this.
Right.
And the Paul Newman auction comes up. Like what's the price of a Rolex? And the highest price ever comes up. And then they go, this is worth $500,000. You're trying to rip me off. So it goes south either way.
Yeah, that's interesting too. We will work with somebody either on the estate side or whatever it is, and they have something that they've either found or something that they've had in their collection, and you're like, okay, well, yeah, sure, that other Paul Newman was this, but yours is water damaged and it's polished and the bracelet's gone and the da-da-da-da. And so I think generally speaking, when it comes to buying and selling and collecting and acquiring, there's kind of like an element of fairness that comes into play. It's treating people with respect, but also, sometimes if we can't like get to that place, I mean, it's not like, and this is kind of funny, not to segue too much, but some people think that there's like this big underground consortium of like vintage watch dealers, and we're all like talking together, and we're all buying this stuff for like $5,000 and selling it for $50,000.
That's what everybody thinks.
That's not the truth. It's I mean, there's some good deals, and sometimes we'll find a great barn find, but more often than not, it's not. I'm overpaying for things because I believe in the piece or the quality's there or it's really authentic or whatever it is, versus me like buying something at $1,000 that's worth like 10. that doesn't happen. It's like the same thing with guitars or Porsches or whatever. Like the days of finding like a rare prototype 356 are pretty much gone.
It happens once in a while, and you're like, wow, how did that happen? Like a Dino Ferrari in someone's barn under like
a tarp.
Garbage for years. Yeah. I think there's a few things that really happened in the watch and the car world. And one is Ferrari. Once those Dinos started going for crazy out there in Half Moon Bay, once that happened, that made people go like, why are the 911s so cheap?
Right.
And then that turned 911.
Yeah.
And that's what's going on with that. And then with the Paul Newman, before that, you could really get a Paul Newman for $100,000.
Yeah, I actually
all day long
have a kind of a funny story about a Paul Newman. Part of what I also do is I act as an advisor to a very small net of collectors. You know, I'll work with a guy who wants to buy his first Datejust to a guy that wants to put $1 million, $2, $3, $4, $5 million into watches and look at them almost like as like an investment portfolio.
Of course, like people with guitars.
Yeah, for sure. And so I have an interesting story. I was working with a collector here, and we built up a pretty good collection. And he goes, you know, Cam, I think I'm ready for a Newman. Let's go find a Newman. I said, all right, let's do it. So we found this great Paul Newman 6239 white dial, just like the one that Paul himself wore. Box Papers watch too, which is kind of special, right?
Yeah, that's especially because it's 68. Who still has that stuff? I do. I'm a weirdo. Everything goes immediately. Yeah, I got all that. I take them. Yeah, I wear a glove. Like when I bought watches, I'd be like, all right, put this stuff here. No finger acids on it.
Yeah.
And that's just dumb new watches.
Yeah. But you know, back in that era, people didn't, it'd be like saving the window sticker off of your brand new car and putting that in a file. Like,
and they were really dumb back then, the stuff. It's the cigarette kind of box style boxes.
It wasn't really collectible. Nobody would have ever thought. And again, I think that the reason why people bought these watches, it wasn't really a luxury thing necessarily for a lot of these things. Obviously, a Patek is a luxury watch.
But these were all tool watches.
Tool watches.
That were $500, $236.
Yeah.
This was, I believe, $236.
I think it may have even been less.
Yeah.
We have a double red Sea Dweller here in our collection right now that has the box, the papers, the original sales receipt, the original appraisal report, all the service doc. It's like the most complete watch that we've ever had, and it's a double red 1665 Sea Dweller. The watch is like so insanely complete, and it's worth probably around $60,000 to $65,000. The guy paid $574 for it back in 1974.
That's the one to get, though, because there it is. You have all the paperwork, everything, and there's sleep at night. I call it the sleep at night dial.
Yeah, well, I mean, you could. The thing that's interesting is like the Porsche that I drive. It's a driver's car, right? It's an original paint car, but it's got a little bit patina. It's got some wear, but it's a car I drive every single day. Now, if that car was like original paint, 5,000 miles, blah, 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 like it would be in a totally different category.
Yeah, that's the problem I had. I always get mint, and then I'm like, then I don't want to use it.
Right.
It's like, I'm going to get a door dings. I'm going to get rock chips. Somebody's going to rear end me by texting and all that.
Yeah. So I think, with some of this stuff, you have to, you got to find what works for you. But going back to this Paul Newman story and kind of talking about modern relevance on stuff that is antique or vintage, we find this Paul Newman. I think the price was, like $145,000, which at the time, and this was pre-Paul Newman auction. This is kind of it during like the relaunch of the Rolex Ceramic Daytona, which drew a lot of attention back to Daytona models as a whole. And
so 2016, 15.
This was in 16, I think. Looking at Tyler because he remembers.
I think that's when that came out. 16, the Ceramic Daytona.
Yeah, and so it was a very complete watch, and for whatever reason, we didn't acquire the piece. So he's kind of an investor customer. Either he wasn't ready or the piece sold before he kind of made his decision on it or whatever. And so, interestingly enough, Paul Newman auction happens. The Daytona ceramic is out. People are there's a lot more awareness around the Daytona as a whole, especially vintage Daytonas, because the new ceramic Daytona has that black ceramic bezel, which looks like a 6263. And so a lot of people that were talking about watches, like the watch blogs and stuff, were kind of drawing those parallel comparisons to the older watches, it being kind of now in this, new modern format. And when we finally acquired his piece, I think we paid $235,000.
Oh, he ended up buying it.
He ended up buying one, but he paid
a different one.
Yeah.
Oh, God. But he paid $100,000 more almost.
About $100,000. Yeah. It's really interesting. I think these things are very iconic, and I think they will remain tangibly relevant. But I don't know how we got off on this tangent about Paul Newman's, but
I was just talking about how all of a sudden, because of these benchmark auctions, with Ferrari Dino Ferraris and Paul Newman's, all of a sudden it became this crazy world. And I believe that a little bit of it is fabricated. Not with the Paul Newmans, because those are crazy rare.
Yeah.
But what's going on right now in the Rolex world is kind of absurd. As far as, like, let's say these Kermits. 2 years ago, $6,500.
You could get one
all day.
Yep.
I remember a buddy of mine as a dealer, and he had 6 of them.
Yeah.
And you go, yeah, this one's $5,500, no box papers. This one's kind of beat. You could have it for $6,000. This one's mint, 65 box papers.
And he wasn't saying, "Oh, this is a Mark I flat 4
None of
serial."
That didn't even matter. Yeah. As a matter of fact, it was all about what color bezels you like, because some were dark green and some were lighter. You're like, oh, I kind of like this bezel.
Right.
It wasn't no flat 4. And also, I think the problem with this is there are a million of those. An actual million.
Yeah.
And people are like, these are rare. And that's the kind of market that really made me go like, this is lunacy. And now I'm like, okay, I'm going back to new.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden new, exactly a year ago, when the Pepsi came, actually when the Blue Sky Dweller came out.
Yeah.
There's not, and I travel all over doing comedy, there is not a stainless steel watch in any store anymore.
Yeah.
Which is, there had to be a secret meeting at Rolex, like, look, we need to be like Patek and not have any watches.
Yeah.
Which is a bizarre, I've never seen anything like this in my life. And I think it's driving action to Omega and stuff like that.
Yeah, which is kind of cool in a good way. But what's interesting about it, and I love Rolex. I love Rolex as a brand. I love Rolex as an innovator. I like that Rolex has their own gold foundry because they're so particular about like the purity of what it is that they're doing. I love that shit, right? But what's interesting is you're saying that you're one of the most innovative, advanced watch companies in the world, and you can't keep up with supply for stainless steel watches.
But do you think that's real or it's fabricated? Because I believe it's fabricated. Because here's why: I was at the Vegas shop, the main one there.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
And I said, yeah, I'm looking for the Pepsi, and this is one of my big complaints. Look, I love the chase. But after a while, it can't be for an Explorer 1.
Right.
It can't be for a regular no date sub. Look, it was always for the Daytona, and I got that. It was like, look, we put this movement in this.
It's exclusive. Yeah.
I always got that, but so the way it works now, you go in, you go, I want a Pepsi, and the guy goes, yeah, those are impossible.
Yeah, it's a 14-month wait list. Yeah, if you're lucky.
They all just say, we don't even take names anymore. Then you go, well, I do like this Day Date 40 Platinum.
Right.
And the blue honeycomb dial. Well, if you pick that up, I could probably get you a stainless steel Pepsi immediately. So they're in the safes.
Yeah.
And this whole thing, now, if it's true that they couldn't keep up, I just don't see that, because How do you go from thousands and thousands of watches at all the bend bridges of America and the malls? You'd go in the mall, there'd be 100. I think what happened was there was just too many watches, and they're like, look, when these sell, we're just going to stop making it. It was flooded like Harley Davidson is right now. Harley Davidson, there's 1 million used motorcycles right now, 1 million out there, any one of them, and they're all like $6,500 now. And I think that's what was going on with Rolex. The used market for, like, let's say a 2004 sub, it would be like $5,000.
Yep.
All day long. And now those are 10 grand.
Right.
Which is like, what? So I see what they did. They got their brand, the value of it back.
Yeah.
But it's really a bizarre thing.
Well, I think it hurts the enthusiast and the collector. And the reality is like, okay, so they just launched this, the new Pepsi, right?
Yeah.
Let me ask you this. Do you think that in 5 to 10 years that they're just going to like discontinue the Pepsi? Nobody knows for sure.
Right.
But I don't think so. Like, look at how long the Zenith Daytona was in production for. Really long time. Right. So I think that there are things that are rare and exclusive and kind of like slip between the cracks. But generally speaking, like this is a GMT. It's a tool watch. It shouldn't be like you can get a Grandmaster complication out of Patek easier in some cases than you can like a GMT or something that is kind of not really that exclusive. I mean, and I'm not trying to shit on what it is, right?
We're not doing that. We're not doing that. But what we're saying is, it's going to go back to the green lens Milgauss. That came out in 2006. I was in Aspen, and a guy bought one for 20 grand. The first 3 months they were out. And then these rumors were going around, well, they can't really recreate that green lens. They're soft. There's problems. These guys were buying them for 15 and stuff. You can get that right now for $5,500.
Yeah.
Which is like, it's the
box
softest.
papers.
Yeah, it's the softest Rolex.
Yeah.
Imagine how angry you'd be if you bought this Pepsi right now for $18,000 and it's a $9,000 watch.
For sure. And what's interesting about this is I do a lot of advisement on what should go into a collection from an investment perspective. I'm not putting ceramic GMTs into people's collections or Daytonas. So guys are like, hey Cam, what do you think about this? I can get a Daytona and I'm never gonna wear it and I'm gonna leave the stickers on it and I'm gonna put it away in its hyperbaric chamber. And I'm like, if you want and I'm very straight up with people, I'm like, this is not a good investment. If you want like a red sub, or if you want a Paul Newman Daytona, or if you want an Admars Piguet 5402, or maybe a Premoon Speedmaster, those are good investments. Rolex is never going to make a Paul Newman 6239 ever again. They're never going to make a 1680 again, right? They're not going to do it. So we're talking about limited, production watches. Rolex was, I think, back in that time period making maybe 1 million watches per year, and that might seem like a lot, but that's Air Kings, Datejust, President, subs, Daytona. I mean, right? So subs were consumed at a reasonable rate, but most people were buying Datejusts and Oyster Perpetuals and kind of the everyday mid-grade to entry-level watch, which makes these things actually tangibly exclusive, meaning there's not that many of them out there. Yeah. The other thing that is kind of creating a demand and also holding the pricing is once these watches are acquired or put into collections, they're not coming out because the guy that's buying it, he doesn't need to sell it.
Yeah, like a John Mayer buys like 10 Paul Newmans.
Yeah.
And then there's 10 of them gone.
Right.
Let's just say
if the economy takes a shit, people are still going to be listening to Your Body is a Wonderland.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
and so those guys are pretty safe from, I think the kind of the economic conditions, and these things are kind of becoming an asset class of their own. The other thing that's very interesting is the abundance of available information on like the mark variants and the special type of things that make these things unique and individual is very much more abundant now today than it was 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago. And now I'm not saying that, hey, there's this thing, it's called the internet and people can go out there and find, but I think the organization of this information, you have, big blogs like Houdinki and all these other companies that are out there, like kind of putting this stuff in front of the people. You're really able to see what is rare and what is, desirable and et cetera, et cetera. So I think that is what has changed. But going back to your thing, I mean, to say that Rolex, there's a stainless steel. I've heard all kinds of shit. Like, there's a stainless steel shortage. We can't keep up with the demand. We can't.
The bezel takes 24 hours to make.
Yeah, or whatever. I think a lot. I would say at least 50% of it, in my professional opinion, is bullshit. I don't think that. I just think that Rolex is one of the most innovative, most technically advanced watchmaking companies in the entire world, and to say that they can't keep up with demand, I think is kind of short-sighted. But it has created a market, right? That watch will retail for $9,300, but if you wanted one on the secondary market, how much is it?
$17,500.
$17,500, $18,000. If it has stickers on it, maybe $20,000. It's like, it's crazy, right? So
it is crazy. What I think is more crazy is maybe
but the supply is going to catch up with that demand.
Yeah, maybe one guy buys it. A guy pops in from Dubai. He's like, I've been looking for that, buddy, you know, and boom, he just throws money. He doesn't care.
Right.
But if you look over and over and over on the watch forums and the eBays and everything, none of them ever sell. They just sit there and relist. And it's so that's the market that trips me out. It's like your line has to be in the water for years and hope a guy snags one. Instead of just selling it for, look, if they were 12, most people would go, it's like $3,000 over. Fuck it.
I'll buy it.
All day long.
Right. And I'll actually wear it and enjoy the piece too.
Absolutely.
There's a kind of a subculture within the watch community that we would just call them flippers. Guys that buy watches, don't take the stickers off, leave them in their hyperbaric chambers, right? Which is in some case okay. Like if you had a Batman right now, or if you could get your hands on a Batman and you were to leave the stickers on it and you were to put it in your safe, in 5 years, somebody will want that watch new and will pay a premium for it. Okay, that's a good investment.
Yeah, that's it. But if you're just flipping the next day.
But yeah, if that's your entire collection is these like hyperbaric type of watches where they're not coming out and you're not like, what's the fun in that? Like most of the guys that I sell watches to, even at the investment level, they actually wear them.
Oh yeah,
they wear them. They enjoy the Paul Newman.
That's what it's about.
Yeah, it's like why have something so cool and so exclusive and not get to enjoy it? That's kind of like not fun. It's like having like a Porsche 911 or something like that and not being able to drive it. Like,
yeah,
I understand it, but also at the same time I don't, because I think these things are really meant to be enjoyed and experienced, and so I don't know.
What do you think about, honestly, like this market of the Kermit and even into the Hulk right now? You're kind of like, dude, that's a watch that's 2 years old. It's $3,000 more. It's just ridiculous.
Well, so if I can compare the two and give you my professional advice on it, I think the Kermit is definitely a lot more special than the
100%. It's the last of the steel bezel for that, and then they go to ceramic.
And it was actually a pretty special watch.
It was great.
Based on the technical and physical elements within the watch itself. So if you look at a Hulk, right? The Hulk is just a stainless steel sub with a green ceramic bezel and a green dial. But if you look at the 16610 LV, which is the Kermit, you have some elements that make up, I think, what we would call like a specialness factor.
First green bezel ever,
right? But also they employed what was called a maxi dial and a maxi handset. And you had the 16610 LV against the 16610, the LV being the Kermit and the other one just being the regular black sub. The black sub didn't have the maxi dial.
Had the small markers. People don't know what we're talking about.
Yep. And it was a watch that was produced side by side to the Kermit. So you have two production watches, but one of them is actually pretty exclusive, whereas one of them was a high production, overly abundant kind of watch. So I think that's what drives the exclusivity for the Kermit. And then you also have the Mark variants, right? And people geek out over like, the flat 4 versus the pointed 4, and a Mark 1, dial versus a Mark 4, and all that kind of stuff. I think they are special. I think they are limited. I think that, and I know this just based on availability, they're definitely out there. It's not like a Paul Newman.
There's definitely a million made.
There's a bunch of them. Yeah. But I think if you were to compare that to like the regular variant, there's a very small number of them compared to just the stock run of the mill black, sub. So I think there's some tangibility there, if we were to call it that.
Absolutely. I mean, if you get one with box and papers, mint, that's a great investment.
It's great.
Yeah. And also, if you get the first year with the flat 4 or the last year,
Yep.
those are 2 good ones.
The bookend pieces are always good investments. Yep.
I look at it a lot like the vintage guitar world, where vintage guitars in the early, I would say 2000s, Guitar Center Hollywood was kind of the flagship of prices.
Sure.
People were looking at, and they would just put a guitar that was, say, worth $8,000, like let's say a Les Paul
Gold
Junior,
top or something.
just a Junior, $8,000 guitar, and they would have it for $18,000.
Right.
And you'd just be going like, what is going on with this?
Right.
And they were hoping eventually they would corner the market, and everything would come up to that. So I think watches are a lot like this, where people go like, well, I'm just going to put any price out there, and if somebody buys it, they buy it.
Yeah, I think, we've had some watches that have sold for some pretty heavy numbers.
What are some of the most expensive besides the Newman?
Most of them are like in the Newman category, or like the rare prototype subs or that kind of stuff. But we've had some interesting watches that I think have kind of set the market. The other thing too, I think that differentiates us and maybe a couple of the other dealers that are out there doing this is, we're really able to see what is rare and what is kind of just run of the mill, because I'm looking at on any given day, maybe 300 watches.
Really?
Right?
So how are you finding them? Are people just emailing you? I'm selling this. People are looking to trade. People are looking for every day. It's like a network.
Yeah. I think for me, I'm also still hunting stuff. I'll look at Craigslist. I'll look at eBay.
You just went to Vegas.
Yep.
Was that a vintage show?
Kind of a mix of both. It was for the International Watch and Jewelry Guild. It's a lot of dealers that get together.
I went to that 2 years ago.
Yeah.
It is the most weirdest thing I've ever been to.
It's like billions of dollars. I don't even know how many.
Yeah.
But it's a lot.
And most of the people are so jaded and don't give a fuck. I saw a guy eating like a submarine sandwich over about $200,000 in watches. He's just like, and I go,
right.
Whoa, look at that. I've been looking for one of these. He's like, yeah, I got 2 here. Yeah, I was like, this is weird. And this is 2 years ago, before what the market is now. I was blown away at how cheap this stuff was.
Sure, yeah.
I was like, whoa, I'm getting burned here.
Yeah.
Out in the world. But normal people can't get into that show.
Yeah, it's interesting because I'm very specific. I'll be lucky if we buy maybe 2 or 3 watches at a show like that. We're very, very picky and very, very selective as to what it is that we bring into our collection. Now, every watch on this table, you could say it's a good pick, but that's after sorting through hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, and after looking at a ton of eBay listings and going through Craigslist ads and looking at other dealers and that kind of stuff. So
you buy stuff on eBay?
Every once in a while. Yeah.
They always say buy the seller.
Yeah. Sometimes there's sleepers. There's sleepers everywhere. Sometimes it's eBay, sometimes it's on Craigslist. And what I mean by sleeper is it might be a price buy, but the thing that I look at before any kind of monetary consideration is made is the condition and the originality of the piece. In many cases, like I was saying earlier, I'll buy a watch and I'll pay cost or above just because the condition is so good. It's there. And
you have the best of that piece.
The best of that piece. Like, we're about condition. We're about helping you build a collection versus just giving you the best deal on like a pre-owned Rolex. That's not our jam, What
do you think the good thing is to buy right now? It seems to be, I would say, 90s Cokes.
Yeah.
That's a thing to put your money into right now. 90s Cokes, because they're even weirder to me than a Pepsi.
Yeah.
And I think eventually they're already going up. You could get a 90s Coke 2 years ago for $6,500.
Now it's like 8 or 9.
Right. Yeah. So what do you think is great?
Well, I mean, so if we're looking at a guy that's maybe going to have, let's say 2, 3, maybe 4 watches, I really like the transitional stuff. Like, for example, this is a 1982. We're looking at a 1982 Rolex Submariner reference 16800, and this is a matte dial.
Box and papers.
Box and papers. That one is kind of the exception because it's a box and papers watch, right?
Beautiful. Super clean. It's almost mint.
It's pretty much new old stock.
Yeah.
Here's another 16800.
How much is that?
This one is 19.5. This one here is also a Rolex 16800, but this is later. And so this one has
the gold markers.
Gold markers, yeah. Not actually, this does have box papers as well. So just to give you a comparison, this is 8200.
That's a great watch
Versus 19.5, right?
Right.
But what makes this one so much more desirable is it's a transitional watch. And what I'm getting towards is I would look at watches like you were saying, like maybe like the Cokes or like a reference 16800 or something like that. It doesn't have to be one that's like 19,500. It could be one that's 9,000. It could be one that's 10,000. But the watches that are more transitional in nature, I think, are really good buys. Omega Speedmasters out of the 80s and the 90s. I think that those watches that possess what is called a tritium dial versus a luminova dial.
Of course, all tritium's like fire.
Yeah, so tritium dial watches that are in the transitional nature, I think, are really good investments. You can still pick up, transitional Speedmasters in like 28 to let's say 35 maybe, depending on the condition. Condition really dictates price in this category, but I think that those are watches that are really worth a look because it's something that you can wear, but they're watches that are becoming very desirable because they kind of have one foot in the vintage world and one foot in the modern world. And I think that those watches fit today's kind of modern lifestyle of being active and on the go, but yet wanting something that is vintage and look and feel, but yet kind of possesses a more modern build quality. Kind of like this 16800 that possesses a matte dial.
It's beautiful.
Which is almost kind of like the same dial that's in a red Submariner or in like a reference 1680. Yeah. But it's in the more modern case with a sapphire crystal. You could go in the pool with it. You could kind of live with it. And yet there's a very small production window of these pieces because they are transitional. So they're actually limited because they're transitional. They didn't make a lot of them.
I think the greatest watch to buy right now, if you don't have a lot of money, is the 2016-17 Sea Dweller ceramic.
Totally.
They made it 2 years.
Yep.
And then they they took it away for a year and came out with the 50th anniversary. That's ugly as hell.
They call it the Sea Dweller 4K.
Yeah.
So SD 4K.
So that watch is a 2-year watch.
Very limited.
And if you can, I've seen some that are mint with stickers right now for like 16. Mm-hmm. They sold for 12.5.
Right.
That is a fucking score right there. 2-year watch.
Yep. There's a lot. I mean, and the other thing too is like, I'd rather see a guy who is getting into this. Let's say he has one watch. I don't want to like shit on Shinola or whatever, but quartz movement, made in China, it's assembled in the United States. I mean, I'd rather see a guy go with like a Seiko or something like that, like a cool vintage Seiko. One of my most favorite watches in my personal collection is a 1980, I think it's an 80, either an 80 or an 81 reference. What is it? Fuck, I can't even remember the reference. My reference numbers are all boggled up. What is it? 72. There you go. It's a 6309. So it's a Seiko diver. It's a 6309. You can still get that watch for like $400. And they have a cult following and they're really relevant. I mean, Mick Jagger even wore one.
People love those.
Right?
People
and they're
love
great
them.
watches.
They are.
You could go in the pool with it. You could, go diving with it. I've actually taken mine scuba diving. Bo, our mutual friend over at LA Watchworks.
I love him.
He loves those watches.
He loves them.
Yeah, they're great watches, right? And so those watches, like, to get into something like this, you don't have to drop $250,000. You don't even have to drop like $1,000. You could buy a cool vintage Seiko and have something that is holding value, but also cool and kind of under the radar and will make the watch collector dude get off, right? Like I'll be wearing that Seiko and I'll be meeting with a customer who has, multiple Paul Newmans in their collection and they love the 6309, right? That's a watch that, matter of fact, I have a really good friend who's a pretty heavy collector here in LA and he has a 6309.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh dude, I'm wearing my 6309 today. We're geeking out about our like $500 Seikos or $350, $500 Seikos. And we both have watches in our collections that are $1 million plus, so it's like, it's funny.
What's $1 million watch?
What's $1 million?
Yeah.
I would say probably Big Crown Submariner.
Big Crown's going for $1 million now?
Yeah. $750 to $1 million.
A Big Crown sub, like a James Bond sub.
Mm-hmm.
What year are we talking? Like the earliest?
Early.
So $1 million?
Yep.
Have you sold one for $1 million?
We have not. They're very elusive watches to find. Normally, those deals, we've had a couple of them in. Most of them aren't public. Most of the time, the customer that we work with that is acquiring that watch definitely wants to remain private. They're definitely an enthusiast as much as they are an investor. The other thing that I think is interesting about those watches is talk about low production. They're actually pretty rare. There's not a lot of them out there.
Big Crown subs, rare?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Very much so.
$1 million.
Yeah, I would say that would be one that would be
mint everything.
Mint,
I get it.
Or I mean, you could probably find one in the 400 to 500,000, but they're pushing.
So it's more than the Newman.
Yeah.
And Newman gets all the press, but there's actually $750,000 Big Crown subs. Mm-hmm. Are those 38 millimeter?
They're 38.
Right.
Yeah. They wear more like a 40.
They do, yeah.
But they're and it's like we were talking about this Tudor, the Black Bay 58.
I love it.
I love that watch,
yeah.
right? But kind of same kind of feel, kind of aesthetic. I mean, this is obviously a modern interpretation.
Of course.
I was in New York, I think it was maybe it was maybe 6 or 7 months ago, and they auctioned a Big Crown Submariner with no bezel. The bezel for that watch is probably pushing $35,000 or $40,000 with a red triangle.
Yeah.
Just
for the bezel.
Just for the bezel, if you can find one. Right? That watch hammered it over $1 million. And it was missing the bezel. It was
I remember
it was like
that.
a project watch.
I actually remember that.
Yeah, it
looked like it just looked like somebody like dropped it or whatever. You're like, what is that beater?
Yeah, and that watch hammered over $1 million. So Big Crowns, I think, are definitely on the rise. No Crown subs are definitely a good place to put some money if you're looking for that kind of stuff. But I think the other thing too that's really important, especially for the guys that I work with and our customer, is buying and investing things that you actually like. That's what it's about. It's just like art.
Yeah. I always tell people, like, don't try to buy a piece of art thinking like this is going to be worth a fortune. If you hate it, it's in your house, it's just ugly. Get something you love, and then if it does go up, it's a double whammy bonus.
Yeah,
You're
totally.
like, wow, this thing's worth. And then those are things you'll never want to sell anyway. You're like, I wouldn't sell it anyway. I love it.
Yeah, totally. And I think it's kind of like cars. Like when I was getting into the air cooled stuff, I was like really dead set on having like a G50 gearbox in a 3.2 Carrera, right? That's like the car that I really wanted. And then I met with a friend and he's like, well, why do you want a G50? And I was like, well, because everybody else told me that I should go for a G50 car. And he's like, well, have you driven a 915? And I'm like, no, I haven't driven a 915 gearbox. And he's like, well, go fucking drive a 915. And I really like the stiffness and the rigidity of a 915 gearbox. Cable driven, clutch versus kind of the mushy G50. I've driven a handful of G50s after having my 915 gearbox, and I don't really like the G50. I don't think, and I hate to say this, but I'm not at the old man level yet where like I need that like super cush hydraulic driven clutch.
There's something cool about just the harder it is to drive. It's like an old panhead Harley or knuckle.
You got to fight with it.
Yeah, and you're just like, and no one else could really drive your car because they get in and they go, what the fuck is this?
Right.
This thing sucks.
Yeah.
It's funny when you drive those old Porsches, they're slow as shit.
Yeah.
You get in and you go, this thing is slow.
Right.
That's why I like the 993.
Yeah.
It was the last of the air-cooled, but pretty modern.
Yeah. And I like all Porsches, right?
I
even
too.
like the new stuff.
Oh, I love it. I love the new T.
Oh, they're so
I want
cool.
the GT3 Touring. That's my dream car.
Yeah, it's great.
Last year, that car. And I love the straight 911.
Yeah.
I don't like any of them where they have the shoulder on the rear with the plastic over the tire. It's
I got you. Yeah.
The turbo shoulder kind of feel. I like where he's like the GT3 where Touring. You don't have any of that. It's just a clean flare.
Totally.
So I'm pretty, and I'm not into wings at all.
Yep.
Everybody like everybody loves the GT2, which is the hardest car to get. Marco's like, oh, you're crazy. No fucking wing. Are you out of your mind? I go, no, I want the Touring. Killer interior. Yeah. Fast as fuck sleeper.
Right.
So when you see it, you go, oh yeah, what's that? And then,
right. I love that stuff. I love in watches, cars, clothes, whatever. I like having kind of the sleeper vibe and mentality. It's not about flash. It's not about pop. It's about you're the only guy, right? Like if you walk into a room and kind of going back to my technology days and why I wanted vintage and what got me into it, I liked being the only guy in the room with that badass watch on that nobody knew anything about.
Yeah.
And they looked at it and they're like, oh, look at that old piece of shit. What's he wearing? Old weird ass Rolex. And I'm like, actually, it's one of 4 ever produced in the entire world. And blah, blah. You know, it's like, I love that.
That's why I like the Nautilus.
Yeah.
I truly believe to a untrained eye and most people, this is pretty weird. And if you're a comedian and you're wearing a Rolex, the people in the crowd, they think all Rolexes are 50 grand for some reason. If they don't know anything, they go, look at this guy with a Rolex. This guy's loaded. It's like,
I paid too much for my ticket.
I'm like, dude, those things are like $2,800. The guy's just wearing a date just.
Yeah.
But if you're wearing a Nautilus, which is a $30,000 watch, but sells for $55,000.
Sure.
No one even knows what it is.
Yeah.
And a good friend of mine recently bought an Aquanaut, and he goes, "It's great. I wear it, and no one knows what it is."
Totally. Yeah, and I think that's the part of the fun with this is the guy who does know about it.
That's the guy you want to talk to.
He just wants to talk to you about it.
That's
and
what's
you guys
great.
are going to be into ship John jackets and selvage denim and
That's what's
Porsches
great.
and that kind of shit.
It weeds out the buffoons.
For sure. Yeah, I love it.
If a guy comes up to me and goes, "Man, I love that watch," I go, "Oh, let's talk a little bit," because you know what the hell it is. Now I know he's going to be into cars. He's going to be into.
You can have a cool conversation.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
he's
totally.
He's not a time bandit.
That's for sure. I think there's the other side of that too, where the guy's like, oh, he's got a ceramic GMT on or whatever, and he's like, you know, who is this guy and can I buy it and blah blah blah. And it's like, okay, guy, calm down, you know. But
I do enjoy the thrill a little bit of the chase of the Pepsi.
yeah.
But it does get me a little bit, I do get just not angry, just more like the wind taken out of your sails when you go, well, there's just no way to get a Nautilus 5711. It's so bizarre to me. Unless you buy one of their gold $80,000 watches, and nobody wants any of those.
Yeah, I think it's interesting too because, like you were saying, Rolex and some of the other manufacturers, even in the car world, like if you wanted a LaFerrari,
yeah, you got to buy 4 Ferraris.
You got to have like 4 Ferraris and have a certain number of spend. And I understand that. Like I understand that the brands are trying to build up loyalty, and I get that, right?
Yeah.
But I think at the core essence of this, it's about celebrating something that is special from a design perspective and from a mechanical perspective. And it kind of, I get it. Like I get bummed out. Like if I wanted, you know, like a Pepsi or something for myself, like even as a dealer, I could get one, but it's like, why would I want to pay over?
Yeah, we were just talking
sticker?
about it.
It just, you know, especially for a watch that I want to wear and enjoy, you know, you can't.
It's a wild world, and I think that it's also great. I don't complain because I enjoy collecting and chasing and everything, but it is also a big, big mystery because here we are coming up on Basel World in about 2 weeks.
Yep.
And they're going to release something, Rolex, and it's going to be another watch we can't get. So I said they could release whatever the fuck they want because no one's going to get it.
Right.
It doesn't matter. They could actually just say, you know, we decided to do a Paul Newman 55-year anniversary or whatever. And it would just be like, well, that's unobtainable.
It's like, hi, Rolex. Yeah, Jesus Christ is on the line, and he wants the GMT. They're like, who, Jesus who?
Yeah,
you can't
like,
get one.
We are Jesus.
Yeah, it's like...
It's funny because we're looking back now. We've got the Daytona was in 16. We knew that was going to be hard to get because all their stainless Daytonas forever were hard to get.
Yep.
The next watch that came out was the Sky Dweller.
Yep.
Impossible to get. And then now we're on the 3rd year, which is the Pepsi.
Yep.
Impossible to get. So whatever they release in 2 weeks, we're going to have 4 watches that you can't buy. And you can't even buy the other ones. But I'm saying, let alone
the new one.
The new one, forget it.
You know what's interesting is, I don't know if you know this, but Rolex actually isn't going to be at Basel this world.
That's right.
Or this year.
I forgot about that. Yeah. They're going to do their own thing, right? They pulled out.
I don't know if they're going to do their own thing or what the deal is. I think
Will they release watches at the same time, but just not be there?
I think it's interesting because I don't know if they need to be there anymore to do that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And again, I don't think it's not a negative thing for me, but what's interesting about it is, I think it's just the world that we live in, right? It's like me being a vintage dealer. My customers are all over the world. We have a good number of customers here in LA, and this is our home base, but I live here. I've been all over the world, Paris, London, Southeast Asia, all over the place. And my customers are there. But the reason why I'm able to have those customers is because of our Instagram and our website and our blog and our social media.
It's a different world now.
So it's a different world.
Instagram is the king.
Yeah, it's like Rolex could like drop this watch on Instagram, and they don't need to spend $30 million on having a booth at Basel World.
They don't. And it looks like they're going to drop a new Milgauss because for some reason
they've been hinting around
30
some stuff.
days of just Milgauss stuff on there, like nonstop. Either they're going to discontinue that one and have like something like this here.
Yeah,
maybe with the honeycomb dial, or the one that had the bezel.
Oh yeah, that'd be sick.
That's insane. Yeah. Or they're just trying to get rid of all their Milgauss.
Right. They're like, oh shit, we went into that portion of the factory and we got a bunch of Milgausses.
Well, the blue face one came out, and it's just kind of they're just I love the Milgauss. I think it's underrated. The green one.
Yeah, it's cool.
I think it's an underrated watch, but most people don't dig it.
High iron glass. It was actually a technical thing. The reason why the glass is green is because it has a higher amount of iron actually in the glass, which makes it green. Sorry to get all nerdy, but I think it's cool. Again, like I'm not talking smack on Rolex. I'm an enthusiast. I love this stuff. It's just a bummer that you have to have in my opinion, a false sense of exclusivity to create a buzz around your product, because I think it's so cool as it is.
It is.
But also I also understand that you don't want to be you don't want to whore yourself out as well. You want to be special, and it's not for everybody. And
well, whatever they did, it's working.
For sure.
But eventually, they're going to have to change it a little bit. They're going to have to tweak it a little. They're going to have to start slipping some out.
Yeah. And
like, okay, a bunch got out. Now we're back here again. That's what they got to do.
Yeah, I think it's going to ebb and flow a little bit. I don't. Would I have done things like that? No, but I mean, Rolex is one of the best marketing companies in the entire world. I mean, you come into our office and I love their advertisements. Matter of fact, I have like displays from the 1960s and stuff that I've like acquired in my collection just because I love it.
Your office is amazing. Oh, look at that. You got Jaws and The Deep.
Oh, yeah.
Two Peter Benchley books, right?
Yeah.
Did Peter Benchley write The Deep?
Yeah, he did.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now,
there's some watch history there too.
Oh yeah,
yeah. So
on Jaws or The Deep?
In Jaws, I know that they have. I think is it an Alsta diver? I think it's an Alsta. And they re-released it recently too. But one of the guys was wearing that.
Dreyfus.
Piece. Yeah,
he has to be the guy wearing that. Now let's before we get out of here, you're downtown.
Yep.
You're in a great. Your place is amazing. I love it. Can people just come? How do they come see watches? How do they meet up with you?
That's a good question.
Let's get into that.
So, we're in downtown LA. I think our building is 110 years old. It was an old bank, so we're in the old bank district. We're not in the jewelry district, but we're close to it because all of our on-staff watchmakers are in the jewelry district. This is our showroom. It's by appointment only. The reason why we're a by appointment only, it's not really a retail setup, so to speak. One, just due to what it is that we do, right? If we're going to pull out a couple Newmans or some heavy pieces, it's a security thing. But also at the same time, more so than just being a security thing, I want to allow the enthusiast or the person that's coming to look at this stuff to really be able to experience it. And that's one of the reasons why we actually have a brick and mortar location versus some of the other guys out there online, and why we welcome people into our showroom is because we really love this. And for us, we kind of have like this like ethos, I guess, and it's on some of our Instagram posts and stuff, but it's really more than just watches. It's about sharing an experience and really getting into the details. And we wanted to cater to that, to our enthusiast customer and to the collector. There is a guy that came in today and he is obsessed with watches. and he really makes me feel normal because I'm crazy obsessed with this shit. So I kind of live vicariously through my customers at some point and kind of have like self-validation. We won't get into the therapy behind all that shit, but you know, it's like, it's cool because, you know, I've seen a ton
I'm
of
not the
Newmans.
only lunatic out there.
Exactly. I'm like, okay, whew, I'm not the only guy that's obsessing over this dial variant or whatever. But it was the first time that he saw Paul Newman ever in person. And it's a watch that he's probably seen on Instagram, and he's seen it on the forums and on the blogs. And seeing his reaction, like, he's like, oh my God, is this a Paul Newman? I'm like, yeah, dude, try it on. Check it out. Like, he got to experience it. He got to see it. He got to, like, it's cool, right?
It really is.
And I want
also, when you come here, you might think you want one watch, but then when I start looking here, I'm like, look at that. It's such an impressive thing to see these different dials and bezels and body shapes, case shapes and everything in person, because then you're like, oh, wow, this is, I mean, most
I could
people
get into that watch, and you're like, I wouldn't even have considered that.
Exactly. I mean, this one is just haunting me right here. This one you were wearing, it's just unbelievable. All this stuff is just phenomenal. So, okay, they can make an appointment. They come down, like serious buyers only, you know.
Yeah, I mean, and the other thing that's interesting too is like we had a gentleman that came in today. He kind of similar experience. He was coming in wanting to look at this 70s Octavia pre-Viceroy. This is a 1972 Hoyer Octavia, and we kind of threw out some other pieces, and he's like, man, like, I'm really into this, like, sub, or I'm really into the Speedmaster. And I think with some of this stuff too, it's kind of like Porsches and or jackets or whatever, but you kind of have to experience it to really understand it. You can read about it, you can look at pictures, you can kind of do whatever, but until you really pick up something, I think, not to be like hippie weirdo voodoo, but like there's kind of an energy to it.
Oh, totally. What is this?
That is sick.
It's cheap.
Yeah, that's a Tudor Submariner with like an insane patina, super ghostly insert.
Oh, man, it's nice. You know what I like about it? It has the date, but no blisters. Is that original crystal?
Yeah, it is. So if you asked Rolex back in the day, they would put a sub crystal, because some guys didn't like the Cyclops or the blister. So it's actually factory modification, but you can also do that. Some guys will do it on their GMTs and stuff if they don't like the Cyclops. But
this thing's great.
Yeah, it's cool.
Oh my God, is this 40 or 38?
That's a 40.
Oh, it looks small. I love this for $8,500. This is all you would need.
Yeah, I mean, that could be a one watch only kind of jam. It's on a NATO strap. It's got some vibe. David Beckham actually has one in his personal collection that's kind of similar to that.
Yeah.
And he's also an ambassador for Tudor, which I think is kind of cool. But in any case, getting back to the showroom and all that kind of stuff, the office was actually a law office for, I think, like 40 years before we moved into the space. We're sitting in what is actually the original law library for the office. So the attorneys and the paralegals would come in and pull the law books and actually read the law out of the books.
Yeah, it looks like a library. It's just beautiful. The other offices aren't like this, huh? They don't have these shelves?
In here?
Yeah.
No, so that was like the executive office, that was reception, and I think this was like a storage room. So we technically have like 4 big rooms in our office. But this is kind of where the watch hangs, go down, and we have a great espresso machine. That's another one of my obsessions, is making good coffee. So yeah, a lot of times it's just make an appointment, come in, we'll pull out some great pieces. We have a lot of watches in our extended inventory, so if there's something that somebody wants to see, we advise that you kind of give us a heads up. Hey, I want to see these 3 watches, so we can make sure that we have them out of the vault and here on prem. But yeah, you can. And the other thing that's interesting too is we've actually had customers that we've done business with for years who are overseas or whatever. They'll actually come to our office and sit down with us, and again, we want to facilitate conversation and a friendship and to kind of share passions. So that's why we kind of created this space. And I don't know. It all kind of ties in together.
Oh, I dig it, man.
Yeah,
I dig it. I'm so glad I came here and you didn't come to my house, because that would just be missing out on the full experience. You got a great stereo here with some vintage monoblock Macintosh. You got a great set of Klipsch speakers. It just looks like the ultimate living room in here. Great books, some good booze, and some fantastic photos. It's just perfect. Wow, look at that book.
Yeah, that thing is insane.
Is that a Toshin book or?
It is, yeah. It just came out. It's called the Rolex Impossible Collection. A very good friend of mine by the name of Eric Wind gave me the book. It's one of the coolest gifts that I've ever.
They still selling that?
They do, yeah. It's a hard one to get, and it's so massive.
It's huge.
But the photography in it is just awesome, and it just makes a great display piece. And
I gotta find that.
yeah, it is not a cheap one.
It's probably like $2,500.
Yeah,
huh?
definitely. Yeah.
You ever been to Rolex in New York in the upstairs office?
Oh, yeah.
They have that book. It's like 4 feet by 4 feet.
It's on like its own
It's on its own stand, and you turn it.
You put the gloves on. You
that
gotta, like,
book
turn it.
is insane,
It's
man.
cool.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm like on a hunt right now. I want like on my Instagram, I kind of like document our travels because I literally fly all over the world meeting with our customers and chasing down watches, and I travel a lot. And we have a great time doing it. But one of the things that I do is like, every airport kind of has their own brand of like timepiece, and they make like these clocks. And so I love the Rolex ones.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I
see this.
I'm like, can I just like put on like a repair suit one day? Maybe just go
take
in,
one.
just like, oh yeah, we're fixing it, because I want one so bad because I think they're so cool. But I'm always like taking pictures of the Rolex clocks at the airports, and I love that stuff. I love the memorabilia, and this to me is, for me specifically, and I think a lot of our collectors and customers this is really a lifestyle. This isn't something that you just kind of like can be involved in or not.
It's a full passion.
Yeah.
It's a full passion. Anybody that understands timepieces right away is just into great handmade stuff.
Yeah.
Cars, boots,
jackets,
clothing.
whatever.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Great homes. Thanks for doing the show, man.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
It was
I think
great
this was
to
really
meet
cool.
you. I love how we met in New
It's
York.
such a great story.
And I'm looking forward to hanging out and talking more with you. Their Instagram is Craft and Tailored.
Yep.
Website the same.
It's craftandtailored.com. Yep.
And take a look at it. Just great stuff. And I'm looking forward to talking to you again, maybe after we see what Rolex releases.
Yeah, it'd be fun.
Me, you, and Bo Gorey and Kevin Christie will get together and we'll sit down and we'll talk about what they released.
Would love to do that. That'd be cool.
All right, guys. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Let There Be Talk. Don't forget to check out all these watches on his Instagram. And don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes. See ya.